All right. So again, thank you guys. I am really excited to be able to have this discussion. And so we're going to jump right in. And so the one thing that, or the first thing that kind of came up for me in even thinking about us all coming together was, is it fair to say that we all love somebody who has had an abortion? And we can popcorn in.
I say yes.
Okay. I echo that. Fair enough to say that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. And so some of you may have read the book, because this book actually was released in 2012. And so as we are embarking upon the 10th year anniversary, it was just ironic that the whole issue surrounding Roe versus Wade kind of hit the waves, right? And so I'm just like, wow, what time better than now to start really diving in and having this conversation. And so I know for me, when it came about that they were going to overturn the ruling for Roe versus Wade, I immediately thought about how unfair and how unfortunate that is for many people. And it's not just indicative of race or one particular, cluster of folks, but it affects everybody across the board, both men and women. And that's why I thought it was important to have an open discussion that included, like the thought processes of the men compared to the thought processes of the women, because while we have different experiences, some of what we experience is kind of similar in nature with regards to feelings and the mental health stuff behind it. And so I just we can kind of just move straight along. Like, what are your thoughts about Roe versus Wade being overturned?
Hey, Ab, it's Kareem. I'm gonna jump in first with a contradiction from my end to your statement.
Okay.
And it's simply because while we like to say that it's equal between races, colors, creeds, backgrounds, I think it is specific to women, and that's the obvious. But I would double down on that simply because it's a choice taken from women, and that choice only it's a choice for women. So there is only one species that walks the face of this earth, human species, that can have children, and that's women. So I think it has to start there. From my end, from my perspective, any choice that I would want in my life as a human being, and any choice that I would want for my daughter as a human being, I don't want any choices taken away from my daughter or my wife. Just like I wouldn't want any choices taken away from myself. But just by the sheer fact that I can't, I think we have to start with it being with women, because they're the only species or human species that can actually have children.
Okay, thank you, Kareem.
I like that. Eb, this is Telly or Jack. I like that, what Kareem said. And for me, and I think a lot of men, we didn't know what Roe versus Wade was. A lot of people didn't, as far as the male species, because it generally doesn't affect us in sort of like Kareem was saying. So I didn't really know about it. When I heard Roe and Wade, I was like, oh, okay. Somebody explained it to me. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So it didn't have a huge impact on me personally, but the women in my life, my family members, it definitely had a huge impact and made me start to think more once I got more information about Roe versus Wade.
Okay, thank you. Any other women?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, while I do agree with what was said so far, I do want to kind of, go a little to the left if I can.
Yes, you
I
can.
do. It absolutely is a woman's right. It's it's all about women's rights, what they can, their choices. However, when you do have the reason that I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that I think it's important to hear from the men is because you have those young girls who get pregnant. and they allow or they invite or they welcome the suggestion of that boyfriend or whoever got them, knocked up, if you will, and if they say, hey, here's a couple dollars, I need you to go and take care of that, because that dad is not, that father, the other contributor as to how this human life is now growing inside this woman, that other contributor, they are not ready to become a father. So while it is ultimately the woman's choice, I believe that the men can also influence that choice. When you have a 14-year-old who's dating, the star football, linebacker, defensive linebacker of the year in high school, and he doesn't want his reputation tainted because he got, the ninth grader, he's in 10th or whatever, he got her knocked up, and he's not ready for children, she's not ready for children. So he then has a voice when it comes to what happens and what that female decides to do, or how she approaches her parent when it comes to the choice. And that's not, since we're, I'm from the gate being transparent, that 14-year-old was me. So I was influenced by the choice of a male because I didn't want his reputation tainted.
Yes, thank you for that. And while I agree with everything thus far, what you just said, there was another question I had, and it really was about the habitual funder of abortions. And so we can circle back to that, but I do think that when it comes to being influenced and making certain decisions, you're right. When it comes to age and just not being aware of what's to come next, and you have somebody that is gone somewhere, and out of love you say, but I love him and I don't want his reputation to be tarnished, I don't want that scholarship to be taken away from him, we can have babies later, whatever the situation may be. But the decision does fall on men just as much as the women. But while yes, it's a woman's body, woman's rights, when it comes to making those decisions, I think because too, society has afforded us the space to say, that's all on her, right? It's not really on him, that's all on her. And what's the saying? Mama's baby, papa's maybe, but it's like they have a choice to kind of pull away, to step away, or whatever that may be. But when it comes to those healthy conversations and those hard decisions, right? I think that a lot of times, especially when you're younger, the female's thought about it is influenced by that of a man. So thank you for that. And we'll go ahead, Tully.
Hi, Ebony. This is Donovan.
Go ahead, Donovan.
Okay. How you doing? I'm gonna go to the right of what you're saying is what something that we all really do not talk about, and that's the Black church. A lot of this is perpetuated in the Black church, that we kind of reinforce males as the head of the household. We reinforce males as being this, and we reinforce males as being that. And we reinforce females to be subservient to men. And in many cases, a lot of these issues around Roe versus Wade, around abortion and so forth, it was perpetuated by the Black church, by the women in the church, and by the women within the community that do not do this to that man, do not hurt that man in this kind of way, and not really holding men accountable for the actions. They have actually gotten themselves into. And so too often men have been excused from their participation and their ownership in the process of having a baby or not having a baby. Too often they have, and society, especially the Black churches, have actually supported that.
That's true. That is true. And we're going to go somewhere with that. But I think that what you said too about the accountability factor, and how a lot of times there are outs that are provided, thus leaving the female in the position to have to make the decision, sometimes by herself, but it's always, or most times, with regards to the guy that she is intertwined with. Go ahead, Telly, you were up. Thank you, Donovan.
No, go ahead. I know you're gonna push the conversation forward. Go ahead. You got it.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm all here. I'm here for it, right? Because I think that this is, again, when I wrote the book, I didn't really want to release the book until I was able to have a conversation paired with it. And so just to be able to have the back and forth exchange, that is just, like, I'm just really elated that we're able to be in this position to finally have the conversation. And again, each of you that are on this call, I handpicked you guys because I know, like Dr. Collins said, like, I'm gonna be transparent from the gate. I know nobody on this call has an issue with transparency. And so, and I think that's how we begin to create the template for how to have these discussions, right? It's not about judgment. And once we move past judging ourselves, it's like, I don't give two poops about what you think. You know what I mean? It's about my own personal freedom. It's about me educating other people and letting them know, like, you're not in this by yourself. We know people, whether it's us or someone else. We've been here before. This is not a standalone incident, you know, and just for people not to feel like they have to suffer in silence moving forward. And so again, just to be able to be fluid in these conversations, you know, I'm really excited about that. Go ahead, Stacey, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, we can blame the church, we can blame the male, the female, but I honestly think that it's just the lack of education, you know, growing up. You know, we're taught to, hey, let's make, like everybody said, let's make sure the other person's okay, but we're never selfish enough to make sure that we're okay. And I think that the conversation have to be had about, one, loving yourself, right? Because when you don't, you will take on what somebody else wants you to do. And just making a conscious decision that, again, abortion is not a form of birth control. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say.
Okay.
And I agree with that, because I was taught how to be a leader and how to be, kind of very independent in my thought processes, except for sex. Because growing up in church, you just ain't supposed to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to talk about the reality. Right. It was abstinence. We learned about abstinence in school, you know, they did the health class and this, that, and the other. But that was like corny, you know what I mean? But when you in church and they telling you abstinence is the way, and all right, I hear what you're saying. But me and my boyfriend, I mean, I love him, you know, and this is what we gonna do.
Yeah.
And mom's not gonna know about it. So it was all good until I popped up pregnant. You know, so I think the lack of education, I agree with that. But then there was also the lack of resources and outlets for when things like this were happening. Because if I went to my mom, the choir director, the church secretary, the one that's been saved, I think, since she was born, I don't think she ever did anything wrong. At least that's what she wanted me to believe. Right. You know what I'm saying? If I went to her with it, and when I did go to her with it, oh my God, you would have thought that the world was ending. But
and then that guilt, right?
Yes, the guilt that was associated with it, then her having to tell my dad, and, you know, I'm underage. Then it put her in a situation, because I'm underage, you know, I was underage at that time, for her to have to sign off on a decision. So now it's like, now I'm making her guilty, along with what, you know, with my infraction as to what I've done. And in that process, I'm still all the way in my mind trying to protect that young man, because he has potential. He's going places. Mm-hmm. So.
Not even looking at your potential and where you're going, but, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know where I was going? To church. I was going to church. That's where I was. I was going to school and the church. Those was my options at that point.
But it goes back to that. It goes back to accountability, right? And go back to what you said. You said 14, right? And then you said it was all good until it wasn't good. But think about how that whole mentality, if we're not holding boys accountable as boys, then they grow up and they become men that are still not being held accountable. And then it still is the same cycle of it was all good and fun until it wasn't, right? It's all fun and games until it's not, until that responsibility kicks in, until that woman gets pregnant. And then now you have a 30-plus-year-old man saying, well, what we gonna do? I can't have another baby, or I don't want any kids yet. How does that happen?
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, like you said, accountability. And we have to start holding people, like once we can educate, then accountability will happen automatically. But until you start to educate and let people learn what self-love is, not just say love yourself, but teach them how, right?
Mhm.
Then I think the change can come. But other than if we keep doing what we're doing, don't do it. Just whatever you do, just don't go out here and have sex. Oh, that's don't do this, don't do that. But you're never telling them what to do. We always tell them what not to do, but we never tell them what to do.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so
I think one of
again,
the,
go
I
ahead.
think one of the biggest issues is that we
I,
can
we can't hear you,
talk.
Donovan.
I'm, I think one of the biggest issues is that we could talk about self love all we want, but the problem is that for too many youth, those behaviors but really have not been demonstrated for the youth to follow. We could say don't do X, Y, and Z, but you look at what we do. They look at our behaviors. If our behaviors do not reflect our words, it means nothing. They're going to do the opposite. So as much as
I
we from the
agree.
church, as much as we from the as much as we from the school system say, love yourself, do this, do that, but they watch us and see us do the exact opposite. It's I am not surprised that these youth are still doing the things they're doing because they are seeing us do this, do the opposite of whatever we are saying. So it's really hard. So it really gonna start back from us as adults of holding ourselves accountable for what we have not done, what we have not shown, what we have not demonstrated, to try to change that whole format to say what can we do moving forward. Because right now we can't reverse what was not done, but we can work on how can we begin to change the process moving forward, and that comes from us taking assessment of our own, of our own actions and understanding how our actions impact those around us. Because many times we could talk about the youth all we want, but it's really us who really impacts them and really influence them, even in ways that we don't realize, directly and indirectly.
Yeah, and that's why
I
I think it's
absolutely
important to
agree.
have
Yep.
those conversations about the accountability piece, whether you're 14 or whether you're 35. I think that if you surround yourself with people that are going to call you out on your BS, call you out on stuff, then that's where the change happens. But if I have my homeboy who is 40 coming to me saying, yeah, Ed, I just paid for this chick to go get an abortion, blah, blah, blah. And you think I'm going to sit with you and laugh about that? No, I'm going to say, don't you think you're too old for that? Like to still be funding that type of behavior? Like what could you have done differently? And I think that piece, like just really pulling people up. And I know Jack he's been waiting to jump in, and I was watching. So go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like the education and all of that. I love it. Right? It's maturity as well. Let's add that piece to it. The accountability is great, but maturity is also a factor in that, because we're raised in different locations, right? We're raised in different households, different morals and principles, where some of those things are instilled in you. We can go to church from Monday through Saturday and Sunday, right? But we still can fall short and do things that we know that we're not supposed to do. But when those things happen, now you have, and somebody said it, influencers, whether it's the male, whether it's the church members, because my man brought up a good point about the church, but I thought he was going in the direction of a lot of people in church said, don't have a baby out of wedlock. A lot of the ladies in church were the ones that said, no, don't do that. I understand what Dr. Collins says about, being 14 and, the guy's a star and all of this, and all of those things factor into those decisions. But I feel that the ultimate decision is of the woman. No matter how many influencers come in and say and sway you left, right, this way, that way, it's still, I have the stance of your choice, your body, your choice, because whether I don't want you to have it, whether I say I'm not going to be there or not, you still have that final say so, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I do agree with you on that. It like I said, it's all about the influence. And I think that I believe it was Donovan who was saying something about, what are we modeling, before the younger generation, because that matters too, because they're going to emulate what they see. You know what I mean? Whatever we present them with, you know what I mean? As much as I said, I refuse to do X, Y, and Z like my mother. Here I am at 46. And I'm like, good God Almighty, I done turned into this woman. You know what I'm saying? So certain things, whether I want it to happen or not, whether it's a now reaction or a response, or if it's later on in life, the things that all of our experiences, you know, they contribute to who we are. But when it comes to this whole Roe versus Wade, I don't know if it was Latanya that said something in reference to, you know, I can't remember exactly what it was that she said, but here we are now at this, self-love. When it comes to teaching, you know, our children, or, you know, not just our children, but even other adults, our peers, you know, our colleagues, you know, trying to encourage them to love themselves and love their bodies. But now you have a law that's being passed that says that love your body, but you can't do what you want to do with your body. So that's a conflict all within itself, because it's like, okay, I want you to love your body and do this, that, and the other, you know, self-care, self-love, you know, respect yourself and this, that, and the other. But now you have the laws of the land, you know, and us church folk, we know the Bible says you got to obey the laws of the land. Now that I'm passed the whole entire law, you know, that says that I can love myself, respect myself, but I can't make choices for myself. And that's where a whole, that becomes an entire just debauchery of just, yeah, it's just crazy.
It is. And I think that nationally, it's just breeding a whole bunch of confusion. There are a lot of teams that are like on edge and afraid of what the future is going to mean for them, right? And so I do think that it's going to, when we think about Roe versus Wade, I was sharing with Stacey a little earlier, it always takes me back to If These Walls Could Talk, right? And how in that movie, it kind of walked you through like those backdoor places to go and to get abortions and to have these things done, where people were becoming infected, people were dying. Like, it was just a mess. And I feel like with this reversal, with the lack of education, or because of the lack of education, we're going to find those same stories starting to resurface. And that's the fear that I have with regards to, you know, the decision being overturned. Because the young people just don't know where to turn. There are adults that don't know where to turn, right? And so that's why, I can't stress it enough, like how important it is to have these conversations. Latanya, you were about to say something, and I started talking.
No, I was saying, what do y'all think about as far as innovative ways of birth controlling? The politicians saying that when you impregnate the woman, you have to start paying child support. So is that a way to start holding people more accountable from the beginning, making us think a little bit more before we act? What are your thoughts as far as having to pay child support at impregnation?
I don't agree with that. Look, I would say that I don't agree with that. I think it's just in working with people and through experiences, right? We all know that a lot, or not a lot, but times, I'll say a lot because it happens more times than it's really talked about. When women don't even know who the baby's dad is. So how am I going to file for child support with an individual when I might have, you know, questions on my end? And I just think that that is just ludicrous, and it kind of feeds the narrative of the space that we're in, as far as like overturning different policies that have already been put in place, and then implementing these new ones that just don't make sense. It always makes me question who's sitting at the table. Go ahead, Kareem.
I'm still trying to figure out this Zoom and when to jump in and when to not. I've been trying to put my hand
Your
up,
box
my
light
thumbs
up.
up. No, I get it. To Dr. Collins' point, I appreciate you saying the fact that the government is, or the justice system has somehow taken away the rights of these women and their ability to make their own choices and make their own decisions. I think that's where it starts, is when the government starts to come in and lay down these laws or take away these or inflict these policies that allow us, or women as human beings, to make human choices. Now we're getting into the complexities of human behavior and how as humans we should be figuring this out and not the laws. Going to the innovative ways to hold people accountable. Like, the church is an innovative way and a mechanism to hold people accountable. It is an innovative way to keep people in line, males and females. Home, having a good upbringing it could be an innovative way to be an example and to set the example for people to make the right decisions, be accountable, hold themselves and others accountable for their actions. When you start moving too far away from human beings holding themselves accountable and being responsible for their own actions is where it even gets more complex. The bottom line for me would always be to either set the example to where I could hold myself accountable and be responsible for my own actions and set the example for someone else to do the same. If we could understand that as a baseline, I think we can build on it and be innovative in all our actions, but give the women back their rights so that the government is not taking those away. And that goes back to kind of what Telly was saying is at the end of the day, it comes down to our ability, specifically as men, to hold one another accountable, to raise individual men or men of likeness to be responsible for their actions and support our women. Like that to me is that simple.
Okay. Okay.
Preach,
I
preach.
I agree with that. This is Leonette again, Dr. Collins again. I can just be Leonette. It's cool. um, but back to what Latanya was, and I hope I don't offend anyone. I'm just saying first things based on how I see it on the Zoom. But Latanya was she made mention about the whole child support thing. You know, that is such a complex situation in and of itself, because if you have two, and this is the law in the state of Delaware, if you have two persons who are unmarried and that mom has a baby, unless that father signs and acknowledges paternity, his name doesn't even go on the birth certificate. So he has to sign to say that I acknowledge that I am this child's father. Now, in him signing, it automatically makes him now liable, if you will, for child support because they're unmarried. So once again, the government is determining, and you have some dads out there that I'm acknowledging paternity because I have every intention on supporting my girlfriend, this chick, whoever she is to him. I have every intention on supporting my child. So I don't need the government to tell me, but then you have those who lack in that area. And then when you start talking about, I believe it was Kareem who was just mentioning, about the innovative ways. Yes, it is our responsibility, but the government has been taking away our rights when it comes to our decision making regarding healthcare. Period. That thing that we have on our jobs that they offer us called managed care. It's literally the government's ability to say what you can and cannot do, how you can and cannot be treated. This needs an authorization. That we're going to reject. We're not going to pay for this. You got to prove that you're sick enough to have that. So this is nothing new. We're just now sliding into an era where they're having more of what they call PPO, where you can kind of self-refer to whoever you want. Before, everything had to go through your primary care physician. That was the best type of care. So the government has been telling us what we can and cannot do with our bodies, even when it warranted. I might need some type of a surgery, but because the doctors sitting behind the desk don't see that I've seen enough specialists or had enough tests or didn't go in the chronology that they feel I should, they can deny my care. So now we have Roe versus Wade saying, okay, because X, Y, and Z, you don't have a right to choose what you can do with your body. And it's not just abortion. It's gonna trickle into the healthcare as well for women. Everything else is going to be impacted. So it's a big monster where the abortion part is the biggest, is that like the umbrella. But when it comes to women's health care, period, it's a lot more things that's going to fall under that, and they're going to slide it in there some kind of way, just because, you're talking to somebody who worked in government for 15 years, and I'm now in education. I worked in government for 15 years, and I'm not against the government, but I see how slick and slimy, straight up, legislators can be to get a law passed, and I'm like, they don't really necessarily, there's not always time for public comment, for people to express how this is going to impact, the different disenfranchised communities or those with various disparities or what have you. So it happens, and we're just, here we are left out, and we just have to follow. So I think, as Kareem said, the innovative ways, yes, the church needs to, at some point advocate for certain things, just as our homes, parents, we need to advocate for certain things, and that's based on your own personal preference and belief system. I'm not here to, me personally, I am a preacher. So I advocate for certain things, but when it comes to this right here, I'm like, I believe that I should have a voice when it comes to what's going to happen to me, for me, and I can't leave it to the laws of the land, because they're as we see, they're becoming more and more corrupt with only certain, the protected classes. It's a joke now. You know what I mean? Protected classes are a joke.
And so you said something too about like just the slickness of the legislators. So one thing that continues to kind of pop up for me too is accessibility, and how a lot of people making these decisions at the table, either their families will have access because they can put them on a plane or whatever, train, get them to where they need to be to have access to a certain procedure, or they are just so blinded and feel and believe that this issue doesn't affect my family. And because it doesn't affect my family, I can say that nobody needs to have access to this because I have a solid belief in this. But it also goes back to what happens in this household stays in this household, sweeping things under the rug. And so those slick legislators are able to continue to operate under that premise because, again, they have accessibility to make sure that those members in their family have access to getting an abortion if that were to be the case.
Excuse me for a minute.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut in, but I want you to think of this process of this whole Roe versus Wade.
Donovan, can you turn your volume up just a little bit?
Okay, I thought I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to think of this in the same way of the war on drugs. Roe versus Wade is taking the same process the war on drugs meant. Now, remember when it was crack cocaine, heroin in the black communities, it was a war on drugs. When it affected the white community, now all these drug companies are getting sued by the governments because it's affecting their population. Right now, Roe versus Wade was something that was in the making for over 40 years to try to get rid of it because it was happening so often in the black community. So they were fighting against it. When it starts to affect their community, it's going to change. Now I know I can't say how or when, but it's taking the same track. It's taking the same process. And just as Dr. Collins said, legislative reps they slimy, they're sneaky. But that's, if you got the money, you could talk to whoever you want to talk to. And I worked in maternal child health care for over 15, 16 years. And I've gone to talk to a lot of these legislators and known and saw how I got pushed aside because I stood next to a guy with a black briefcase and like a $1,500 suit. I know I didn't have the money, but they pushed me aside because of him. So it's going to really boil down to how do we really combat this in a way? How do we begin to understand what's taking place, and how do we find ways to address it in a way that, unfortunately, right now we can't reverse it. No, but we got to find ways to deal with it, help our women, our families, and our men try to deal with the situation at hand. Because if not, it's going to be a point where you're going to have those back alleys abortions. And what we don't realize too, it's not just about abortion. It's about birth control. It's about infertility stuff. It's about just like Dr. Collins said, it's about women's health in general, that we don't understand how this law will really impact everything it has to do with women. And what it has to do with women is about reproduction and about the numbers of reproduction, and how it's really about controlling the birth rates in this country and what population they really want to try to control. Because right now, the white establishment, they're terrified that these numbers are changing within 20 years, that they're going to become the minority, and they don't want that to happen.
You said it. I was just about to say that, but
That's
you said it.
exactly what's happening. That is exactly what's happening. And I like the fact that you kind of
It's
put
like
it
fear-based. Yeah.
exactly, but to put it in the context of it being similar to the war on drugs, that is so true, right? And it's that, you know, there is a huge fear that now the minority races are now becoming the majority, right? And so it's like, yeah, we have to take this away from them because we don't want to be the outliers. Think about, like, even when Trump was there, make America great again. This is all part of that plan, you know, to make America great again. And so it's just like, while like Donovan said, with the war on drugs and how it's going to circle back, I feel like it's there. Again, it just goes back to the access and the accessibility and them being able to kind of shun it or you know, make it go away, where a lot of times we're not in positions to make things go away. But to get to that, I think is doing what we're doing tonight. Like, again, just having these what would be considered a forbidden or taboo thing to discuss by being open about what's happening. And that's how we educate the kids, by modeling for them. We don't have to keep these secrets. You know what I mean? We've been taught to keep secrets by those that want to make America great again. But we have to shine a light on those dark places. We have to talk about those forbidden things so that our kids are aware, so that other adults understand, like, yo, I'm not in this thing alone. Like, oh, you went through the same thing, you suffered the same thing, you're feeling the same thing. You know, again, just having roundtables, making it accessible for our folks to have a safe space to have these hard conversations. Stacey, were you trying to say something?
Yes, I just want to say one more thing about, like, the government and all that stuff. See, the one thing that we all have to pay attention to is, we'll say, oh, look at Trump, he's doing this, and what is he talking about now? But those are distractions, so that we're not paying attention to what's going on behind closed doors. And they get us every single time. We get so caught up in, you know, all the hoopla that's going on the news and all that other kind of stuff, but we're not paying attention. And so we just have to start paying attention.
Yeah.
That's why I watch Fox and CNN also. I watch all of them because I want to get the full picture. I watch MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, because if you just watch one, you miss out on so much. You don't understand what's really going on. So I watch all of them, so I know I get a full, complete picture of what's the issue of the day and how each and every segment is actually looking at that actual same issue, so I can get a better understanding as to where the process is going. Because much too often, many of us right now, I talk to a lot of people my age, and I'm not gonna say my age, but I talk to a lot of people our age, and many of them don't even watch the news anymore because they say it's just always crime, it's always about somebody getting killed. But it's so much information that's on the news, and I talk about, what about these news apps? There's so much information is out there that we choose not to really pay attention to. And when we don't choose to pay attention to it, that's how we focus on what Trump is doing, the idiocy, the stuff that he's doing, without understanding, okay, what are Republicans doing over here? What are Democrats doing over here? What are independents doing over here? And what's happening on the state levels over here? Because we don't pay attention to those things. We pay attention to those things that they kind of glare out at you. Bam, 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 bam. But it's those subtle things that we don't pay attention to that always catch us in the end. Just like this Roe versus Wade. This been brewing for 40 years and nobody paid attention to it until now.
Until now. Yeah.
Until excuse me. But the bad thing is, I forgot, it's called the freedom. I forgot what kind of society it was. The free society, I think that's what they call it. They were planning to get these actual judges in the Supreme Court for like 30 years. And they just had to find a conduit, which was Trump, to get them in there.
Yeah.
And now they got them in there. That was their plan from the door to do this. So for one, I don't know why we're surprised. I don't know why we're in such an uproar, because we should have been planning for this from the door, and we weren't. And that's my biggest frustration is, as people, we tend not to plan ahead when we know what's coming, or rather, we should have known what was coming.
Yeah.
Because anytime they tell us from the door, they, like Trump, he tell you exactly what he's going to do, and then we get surprised when he do it. He said he's going to do it. So start planning ahead of time, and don't wait till it happens and then try to plan. We need to start doing what you're doing right now, plan for the next 4 or 5 years ahead, and see what can we try to do in the midst of what's going on right now. And don't wait till 5 years out and it's like, oh, we got to figure out what to do now because it's too late.
Yeah.
You
Go
can't
ahead,
keep playing
Jack.
chess while they're playing chess. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, perfect. Like when he put the war on drugs thing in there, here's something that, you know, for me, I'm a person that I want to be able to control what I can control, right? I already know I can't control the government. And me, Kareem, and a lot of us men, we had a huge talk about this at his house one time, is controlling what we can control and how can we manipulate and be able to maneuver throughout what is set in front of us. So he put the war on drugs. I asked each and every one of you, that was a government implemented thing. We know there was different things that happened behind that, but when they implemented that, what stopped you from using drugs? Was it the DARE program that stopped any one of y'all from using crack, heroin, all of these things? No, for me, it wasn't. It was my surroundings, my household, that I knew, okay, this person does this. Do I want to do that? Yes or no? Right? So growing up, I was raised by a single mom. So my mom told me at a very young age, and it was taboo to talk about it, but my mom was that person that was like, nah, I'm raising men, so I'm going to talk about it. My mom showed us at 12 and 14 how to put on a condom, told us don't take it off unless you want to make a baby or catch a disease. That's what I lived with up until about 21, when I said, all right, I think I'm a little grown now to go raw, right? You know what I'm saying? But that's what was in my mind going in the military, all in high school, was don't take this condom off until you're ready to make a baby or you're going to catch a disease. I was fearful to do that. So I think a lot of the things that we are saying is awesome, great. Yes, the government is doing this, but in our household is how we can control that. With the women healthcare, we can start talking to our kids, and not just our household. And I'll say this word, and I hope you guys understand it. We need to get back to the village. This is the start of a village, right? This is the start of a village. So when you start your village here, now y'all take this, and Latanya and Dr. Collins, without Dr. Ebb, y'all go have your own village as well. Now we're taking a piece from this, and we're going to building our different villages to where now we can't control who's in the White House. We can't control the legislators, who they vote in, 40 years in the make. We can't control all of that, but I can control what I tell my sons. I can control what I tell my village. I can control what I get from my village to take back to my people. You understand? So I think we don't want to bite off too much that we can chew, but I think at the bottom line, baseline of it is your household. How does it start in your household? How are you going to react if something does happen to my 14-year-old son, if he gets a girl pregnant? What are my principles and my morals that I'm giving him? Even if that girl's family goes, no, we want to have an abortion. Well, this is what we want to do. Ultimately, it's your choice. I don't care if my boy is a star football player, if he's going to be whatever it is, he has to step up now and become a man. I'm going to help him in that. And if you guys go with it, then you know you guys got my full support, and it's all on that communication and
I
things
can
of that
appreciate
nature.
that. I can definitely appreciate that because I'm the same way with my sons, you know, and it's like if you create a situation, yes, you have a responsibility and an obligation, but there are a lot of times, and although, you know, like years ago, that was it. Oh, my son has a future. Those conversations are changing, but they are still happening. And so I think that that's great. And thank you for saying that and revisiting the village. All right, so Latanya had her hand up and then Kareem.
I guess overall it stems back to education. We have to read. The news is wonderful, it's great, but we're going to get it on the back end. So I feel like we have to, as Jack said, get that village back together. We got to get ahead of the curve. We as a people, we need to read more, being in education. We're missing out on a lot of information. We're missing out on a lot of ability of understanding policy, and we as adults have to do better to guide our youth in a better direction. Like, it might be smart to encourage a lot of them to pay attention to policy. What is it? Where do we find it? We as a people, we have to start paying attention, because things are happening right underneath of our noses, and they're laughing at us. So we just have to do better. We have to educate our boys. If you stick it in a little bit, we all know what can happen. We have to educate our girls to value themselves. Like, you don't have to, it could be real quick, a rubbing episode, but I just feel like we have to do better. So I do agree with that village mentality, but we got to restructure our family foundation as a community, because that is severely broken, because we're relying on mainstream culture to raise our kids and to guide them. Hence, you have a lot of kids out here just being very loose. But I don't know, with our generation, I don't know the ages of everybody on this call, but I feel like some of us are teetering in that grandparenting age group. But with these younger parents, maybe we could serve as role models for them as far as their parenting too. But we got to rebuild that family structure to kind of do what Jack said as far as the village.
Absolutely. All right, Kareem, you're up. You're on mute, Kareem.
Hey, I know I got it. Hey, don't say it like you're up, like hey, yeah, whatever this dude got to say. No.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. Hey, Jack, I'm proud of you, bro. Like I love it. Like, to think what you just said, and for in full transparency on what Jack just said on the last conversation we had. We were having a beer in my garage, and that conversation was kind of heated because we had two different points of view that we felt pretty passionate about how we infiltrate, if you will, the system in a way to be instrument of change. And he had one idea on how we do it, and I had an idea on how I would do it, but it ultimately came down to our sphere of influence, our sphere of control, our accountability, our responsibility, and how we translate that not only for ourselves amongst each other as men and as brothers to our village, but how we translate it to our sons who may not read and get the education that they need from somebody else. But us being a generation removed from what they're going through or how they're going through life, we have to somehow translate what they're seeing, the echo chambers that they're in, and the way they're receiving information, and bring it out, understand the way we understand it, change the language, and then put it back into their mind in a way that they can receive it, accept it, and be comfortable moving with it. What that looks like is, like you said, hey, don't put the tip in, because you know what could happen. Some boys may take that as, hey, I want to put the tip in so I can see what happens. Challenge accepted, Dad. However, what we need to be able to do is give them the full conversation. Hey, when you meet a young lady, this is how you treat her. When you get to the point where she trusts you enough to put that tip in, that means you have to show her that whatever comes on the other side of it, you're ready to take full responsibility and be accountable for the actions of putting that tip in and this decision that she made to allow you to do it. That's a full translation. But we have to be able to go into those areas and have those deep conversations. And really, those are difficult conversations to have with a kid. But as adults here in this room, we could be like our own test dummies, if you will. We're in an experimental environment and say, hey, look, how do we broach these conversations with our kids? Hey, I got a boy on the way. I got a boy that's going into this stage of his life. Hey, Ed, help me understand how we can kind of navigate that. I could teach him some stuff to help him navigate. Hey, Tanya, I don't understand this policy and what just came out. Did you see it? Yes, I saw it. Let's translate it together so that I have a full understanding and I can break that down to my village. We learn from one another and then we spread it across the village. Spreading it across the village means I have to be open and willing and able to have these conversations, the rational to the unrational, the rational to the rational, and sometimes the unrational to the rational in order to make sense of this thing we call life. And then translate that down to the kids. I think that's how we build the village, from sphere of control, sphere of influence, accountability, responsibility.
Okay, pass around the collection plate, but that was dope. That was dope. But no, I think that is true. And I think that, growing up, the Brady Bunch was one of my favorite shows, right? So us being able to do Zoom and to see all of these boxes and how all of the individuals can come together to kind of gel and mesh together as the village. And I love what Jack said about if each person in each of these boxes, right, you now take this information out to your select village, there's going to be somebody from your village that's going to take it out to another village. And that's how we grow it. And that's how we get back to it. But again, just making it a safe space to have these types of conversations, even to the point of including the kids in these types of conversations, right? Because yeah, as adults, we can sit around and we can bust it up. And I would like to say, like in our family, we sit down and we have these tough conversations with the kids, but then they're in spaces with their peers where the parents aren't having the conversations. So then our kids are looking at them like, y'all never talked about that? We talk about that all the time. Like it's second nature. And I'm gonna use my nephew as an example. I remember him transitioning from middle school to high school, and he was gung-ho. I am going to have sex. I don't care what anybody says. I am going to have sex. Well, why? Tell us why. And his only thing was he didn't want to be a virgin going into high school. Again, we think about cultural norms and what's around. So if all of your peers are getting a little piece or, whatever the kids say nowadays, but if they're active and you're not, and you feel like you're on this island, but empowering him as a young man to say it's okay to be a virgin going into high school. You know what I mean? If anything, going back to what Dr. Collins said about I was taught how to be a leader, that's leadership capabilities and qualities. That shows that you have self-discipline. It's not to say that you don't want to do it, but I have self-discipline because I need to look at every chick that I make a decision to lay down with as somebody that could potentially be my baby's mother. Do you want to be connected to this young lady for the rest of your life for a quick piece of tail? And I think those are the conversations, and so Jack, I'm similar to your mom. I told my kids, listen, you can't plant seeds everywhere you go. You like money, right? You want to get your money or you want to plant these seeds with these little girls because you're going to have a responsibility and they're going to take all your money. Or do you want your penis to look like this broccoli? Like stuff like that, but just really going in with the kids and saying, listen, this is what it's hitting for. This is what it is. But I think really just expanding the village, being comfortable and transparent enough to have the tough conversations and creating space for them to come to us with difficult decisions.
You feel like sex education should be brought back to mainstream so that school becomes a part of that village again as well? I remember sex education. Gosh, that was an elementary school. That was Pulaski. So maybe what's that fifth? That was like 5th or 6th grade. But I still remember that at my ripe age, my sex education class and what I learned from that class. So do y'all?
I think you have to be mindful too of who's in front of the kids teaching these classes, right? And so it's like everybody can't reach a kid. Everybody's not comfortable talking like we're talking, right? And so I don't need you in front of my son just reading a book about contraception, what that means, pre-ejaculation. I want you to go in with him. Listen, if you rub up on a girl and y'all don't have y'all's pants on, you know what I mean? It's like you have to be able to have certain conversations. Everybody is not capable, but everybody is not. So that's the thing, right? Everybody is not capable of teaching these kids. And so if that means as a village, we create our own sex ed, then that's what we need to do because we can't rely on the public education or the school system to teach our kids everything that they need to know about this world. This world isn't built for them to really survive in without proper knowledge. Right. And so it's up to us as a village to say, all right, I know that this is what the school is teaching you because the Department of Education says that you need to meet all of these milestones, but there's a lot of things that tie back to that foundation in the village that need to be addressed too in preparation for that. And so I agree with sex ed being brought back, but I think that we need to take control of being able to educate our own young people.
Hey, Eb, quick question. If we were to teach sex education to the village, and this isn't sarcasm, it's a real question. What would it look like? Like walk me through that we got an hour on Zoom we bring in, you pick the age group, and we're gonna have a sex education class.
From what I would do, I would think that we will walk them through like the emotions that go along with making certain decisions, you know, the maturity level that is warranted, because I think that that's a big piece too. A lot of people are having sex and they're not developmentally ready. They're not mentally ready, you know, for what's to come. Think about it. And I talk to young people all the time about how, why is it that this person needs to be considered your girlfriend or your boyfriend? Having those conversations, what makes it different than just being a friend? Because once you give a young person that title, now they become possessive. Now they can't control their emotions. Now they think that they can put their hands on you. They can go through your phone. They can just pop up at your house. And it gets to a point, then you throw sex in the mix. Now they're disrespecting your parents along with theirs to make sure that they can get to you in the way that they need to. And so I think just really kind of talking about all of the things that go into making a decision to even give somebody the title of boyfriend and girlfriend, like prior to getting to the sex part. I think that, like Jack said, teaching them how to put on a condom, what that looks like, why it's important to wear. It's so much more than just impregnating somebody, going through different diseases and what they look like. There are diseases that you can be treated for. There are others that will be your lifelong friend, you know, and so for me, it's that. Being comfortable enough to go to your parents before the decision is made. Well, mom, dad, you know, I've been dating so-and-so for X amount of time, and we think that we're ready. And collectively, when we bring the village into that part of the education, it's like, as parents, you have to be grounded enough to have these conversations with your children, because the time is going to come. You know, sex is something they're going to explore. It's just a matter of timing. And so you have to be comfortable enough to have the conversation. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that nobody on this call will want their 12-year-old, 13-year-old out here having just random sex. But again, if the conversations aren't being had, then the kids can't address it. We can't address it. Or if I am just emotionally off or unhinged and my daughter comes to me and says, I think I'm ready to have sex, and I immediately want to punish her or put my hands on her, again, what message is that sending? So I think it's complex. I don't think that there's one set way to do it, but I do think that there are a lot of pivotal points that would need to be addressed in the village being able to implement and roll out a sex ed course.
Now we have to be mindful this generation is different. They have a lot more access than we did. They have free Pornhub. Like, they could teach themselves what they think they want to know because it feels good. So I think we, like with the traditional approach, we also have to make sure they're aware of their anatomy and what that means. Because a little girl who's getting her period at 9 or 10, we already know what can happen. You know what I mean? So we have to, outside of all of that, we need to treat it from an anatomy standpoint too, so that they understand, because they have access to how to do it, when it, like what it looked like.
Well, and it's in every single song that's out. So, you know, it's like helping them to also understand like what's real and what's not, and how a lot of these people, yeah, they rap and they sing about this stuff, but they're not out here doing it in that manner. You know, it's what sells. Exactly. And so we have a mindset or a culture bred in this particular generation that everything has to be sexual, you know, like where we were still playing with dolls going into middle school, these kids in elementary school are talking about what boys are hot, you know, what a boyfriend is, what a girlfriend is, and all of that stuff. And, you know, out here popping and shaking their bodies in ways that we would have never done at that age because it's being condoned. And so I do agree that they have access to a whole lot of stuff. But again, I think it's just a matter of who are we putting in front of our kids to teach them about sex ed and what that looks like.
And I actually think a lot of that needs to come from within the home. Like, parents have to make their kids feel uncomfortable to be comfortable, you know? So they have to be uncomfortable. Like with my children, I made them so uncomfortable that after a while, they just felt comfortable talking about it. And again, you have to get them to a place where I'm teaching you about this, right? So that you're armed with decision-making, you can process. Because a lot of times these kids can't even process through what's right or what's wrong. But, you know, with sex education, they're only going to teach them in school, you know, just the little basic things. Like you said, I like the fact that my kids weren't even able to have their head up to the table, and I was teaching them about diseases and everything else. So yeah, I think that that's a good idea. And also with the anatomy part, because again, if somebody at 8 or 9 have their menstrual, they can get pregnant. So it all ties in together. Yep, I
And the
agree.
parents have to be stretched past their uncomfortability. So I think it was Dr. Collins and then Donovan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that just so I'm bivocational. I am a pastor, right? But I work as the director of DAPI. If anybody knows what DAPI is, Delaware Adolescence Program Incorporated. DAPI is a school that has been around for 53 years. Now, how many generations is that? 53 years. It's a school for pregnant and parenting teen moms. So I am so like elated and excited to hear on this call about how impactful and how we all agree about the village and things that should take place in the home. But my everyday reality is when there are students who are now coming to my school who are pregnant or they already have their children because they are their own village. They have drug addicted parents. They have, they're the oldest sibling that are raising 5 other younger siblings because mom is still doing, the streets and the club and this, that, and the other. So, they don't have the village per se. And so they end up pregnant. And then now education, we've said at DAPI, well, we don't want you to think that because you're pregnant, you can't still graduate from high school, or you can't still, like the trajectory of your life is just, coming to a screeching halt. Nothing else can happen positive for you because now you're a teen mom. And to go back to what Ebony was saying, she said, in middle school, well, unfortunately, when I'm doing schedules right now for the students to come back September 6th, I had to get middle school classes in the schedule because my youngest coming is a middle schooler. And it's sad to say, but that's real. It's real that we have 12 and 13-year-olds who are now about to become, they don't even really know their bodies well enough to even be trying to have, like what Latanya was saying, the anatomy part, they don't even know their bodies well enough to try to even become a parent, but they didn't have the guidance. So, when Roe versus Wade came up, when we were talking about it towards the close of the school year, I think it was Donovan who was talking about maternal health. Well, that's one of the classes that is mandatory at DAPI. You have to take, if you are a student at DAPI, it's not an elective, it's a mandatory class, maternal health. And so we're talking about it, and 6 of the 9 girls that we had no clue, even though it's in the news, even though it's been being talked about, even though it really affects them, especially, going forward, but they had no clue about any of it. And so at that point, I had charged our school nurse, who is also the maternal health teacher, I need them to do a report. I need them to read up on Roe versus Wade and give a report, give us a written narrative as to how they think it can impact them in the next 5 years, whether they're pregnant or whether they already have their child. I made that a part of the maternal health curriculum because they needed to know.
Yes.
They were ignorant and unlearned. So I'm now becoming a village to those without a village. I don't mind because I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And that means it's no different than, Some of us, I know I was, probably Ebony, you were too. I was the cool mom. Everybody wanted to hang out at my house because, we did fun things. And although my mother didn't necessarily have these conversations with me, I made it my business. Y'all heard me say I was trying my best not to be like my mom. Well, I did succeed in one area, and that is the fact that I gave my children, my son, I only have one born, but I have bonus children. I gave them a voice. I wanted to hear their thoughts. I wanted to hear what they had to say. So we had to sit down. Tell me what's on your mind. And then I addressed it from a perspective of I'm cool, but I'm still a parent, but I want y'all to feel comfortable talking to me. So I'm always going to be that person to provide you with guidance. I'm always in a place of authority, but I want you to be comfortable. So we call our dappy students dappy daughters. So I'm treating them like they're my daughters because they don't have moms as examples to show them and to teach them and to love on them, to show, now at this point, my job is to prevent second pregnancies.
Yes.
That's where I am. Because they come into us, it's already too late. So I'm in the business now of preventing second pregnancies and preventing the spread of disease and things like that. But our village has to expand. It is in our home, but it definitely has to expand outside of our homes because there are some that just don't have a village.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? And so Donovan and I met almost 15 years ago, and he was, one of the directors in the maternal health program, and I was working as a counselor with a program called Project Elect, where we worked with pregnant and parenting teens as well. And so that type of programming is very, very near and dear to me because they need a village. And like you said, like a lot of them are coming and they are their own village and they just don't know how. And I still keep in touch with a lot of my babies, and I claim them all as mine when I start working with them. And even now in like the sector of traditional counseling, when I meet with a family, that's one of the things that I say when I start out. I'm like, when your kid makes a decision to work with Miss Ebony, I'm going to have the same expectations for them that I would have for my own children, and I'm going to push them in that fashion. And when we think about those hard conversations and just pushing them and being uncomfortable, I also say there are times where they might not necessarily like me and they might leave here and say, I don't like Miss Ebony, but that's okay because they have time to process it, and to kind of circle back to it, because I'm not going to put them in harm's way, but I am going to challenge their thought process. And so I love the fact that you are there at Dappy, and I think it's a great fit. So Donovan and then Kareem.
Just like Ebony said, we met probably, it was more than 15 years ago to air, but that's okay.
I know, I just always say 15 because it's safe.
But as Dr. Collins was saying, and as we talked about before about how do we teach sex ed in school right now, it's such a difficult topic to talk about because we have to touch on so many different issues. Working in maternal child health, we didn't just deal with the pregnancies or the process of pregnancies or what happens after pregnancy. We also had to deal with those other aspects of those family issues that we have to talk about, because there was a lot of kids, just like Dr. Collins said, she got a 12-year. We had a 10-year-old girl who was pregnant in our program. Wasn't pregnant by a 13-year-old boy, wasn't pregnant by an 18-year-old boy, was pregnant by a 36-year-old man. So we got to deal with all those other secrets that we got to talk about. We had people in our program who was the mother, the great grandmother, the grandmother, the mother, and now the daughter. They all was in our program. All those generations were in our program, and at the same time, the youngest one knew no more than the oldest one did about their own bodies and how it functioned. No matter how much you try, you're still fighting against all these different forces that you got to take time. That it is a time-consuming process. We got to keep in mind. It's not a one-trick pony. It's not something that's going to happen just overnight. It's a long-term process because this problem did not just happen overnight. So it's about it's like a lifelong learning of these individuals. They have to take into consideration because everything affects them in so many different ways. From if you're dealing with asthma and all these other things going on, their mental health and everything is impacted by how it impacts their bodies and how their bodies reproduce and how it may affect them from having children moving forward. But all these things, it's so hard to talk about how can we address this one issue when it has so many tentacles that goes into so many different realms that we have to be savvy enough to really multitask all these issues to try to focus in on one, but also at the same time addressing all those other multitude of issues that are impacted by this one issue. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. Like, it's a lifelong process. It is something that it's not going to be easy, but just as the brother said, we start with our own. I mean, we start with our own village, and I know I've done it for myself. I teach both my son and my daughter about how you should treat a young man, and how you should treat a young woman, and how they should treat you. So for as long as I've been married, my kids have always gone out with my wife and I on our anniversary, or like on Valentine's Day, because I want them to understand what it means. I don't want them to say, "Oh, I love you." I want them to understand what love means. I want them to see us showing love to each other. And love doesn't always mean, oh, you're always happy or something. They see us fuss too, but they also see us talking through as well. So all those things are really important when we're talking about being that village, and sharing all this, because it takes more. It's more than just information. It's more about giving the information, but also emulating those behaviors that go along with the information that we're sharing. So that's it.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Kareem.
Oh man, like this is awesome. Like every time I get to go on mute, a lot of the stuff I was gonna say has already been said, kind of in the conversations. The one thing I would just add is, as we go out with our sphere of control and start setting the village, just remember the balance of the village. Um, a woman can teach a young lady, how to be a woman as she grows, and can teach her how to be a mother. But it does take a man in front of her, a good man, an example of a good man on how to love a good man, and what it feels like to be loved by a good man. So the balance of a village brings that in. Um, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, that responsibility. And there is that inherent nature to want to educate, especially the women as they've come in, these young ladies as they're going through pregnancies and going through young motherhood. At some point, they're going to grow, and want to be loved by a man. And it's important to teach them that self-love, but it's also important to teach them how to love, and how, the expectation of the right kind of love coming back, and it can be spoken in one way, but it can be shown and demonstrated in another. So as we set these villages, just understand that there's a balance that has to be had, um, in the short term, or in the near term, or in the far end. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you. And so again, it is, our time is winding down. I appreciate all of you again for coming in, because you guys are my village, and there was just something posted not too long ago. Michelle may have brought it to my attention, but it said, just like we're talking about the village for the kids, it's important that adults have a village as well, and that you surround yourself with really good people. And so, again, you guys are my village. And I love each one of you. I appreciate each of you again for not finding it robbery to take the time out this evening to join me in this discussion. But I think that this is where it starts. I think that just being able to come together collectively to have these conversations, to model these conversations, is what the community needs at large, And so again, part of the premise of me relaunching the clinic, having this discussion about Roe versus Wade and what it means for everyone, because it's a domino effect. And I think that, like, we started with one thing, but we have covered so much in our time together this evening. And the one thing Kareem said, and of course my brain is like, boop, 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 but he talked about the complexities of human law, right? That's huge. And that's what this is all about, because it is so complex. It's not a one and done. You can't just hop on and then we go back to life as normal. I think that it's important that we become even more innovative than what we already are, because I think each one of you are an innovator, but that we become even more innovative in creating the movement behind these types of discussions. And so I'm going to be reaching out to you guys, ultimately, I want to go live. I want to do a few lives, and, we can talk about the complexities of human law, because it is so broad. And I just think that, and every one of you on this call know that this is something I've been wanting to kind of tap into for quite some time. And so just to, again, have all of you be a part of me relaunching this project and starting the momentum behind having these conversations, I just want to say thank you all. Again, I can't say it enough, but I am so grateful that you guys agreed to come on tonight.
Hey, Eb, I'm gonna throw it right
Go
back
ahead.
at you and give you your thanks. Everyone on here, I think, would agree that it takes a strong individual to kind of spearhead any difficult conversation. And I've always been in awe of your ability to navigate some of the most difficult conversations while staying on task. And reaching and teaching all along the way. So I just want to say thanks for what you're doing and kind of pioneering this new effort and how we not only learn from one another, but take that learning and understanding and push it to a generation behind us. And anytime you need anything from me, you always know we're just a phone call away. And I'll echo that by saying I had two gentlemen sitting in the car with me as we had this phone conversation that I grew up with. We've known each other for upwards of about probably 40 years. And we've never had such an in-depth conversation as friends, but we were able to take part in this Zoom call and communicate while we were on mute in ways that we could
Oh,
reach
you should
one
have
and
brought
teach one.
them in.
Hey, but it was pretty awesome just to share this experience with some lifelong friends and bring them into the village and be an extension to not only their village, but to ours. So thanks again for that.
Yeah, welcome to the village, fellas.
Yo, Kareem always takes I was just about to say the same thing, yo. Like this dude. But no, thank you so much. And I was gonna say this to you, Eb, and everybody else that's here, and myself included. Don't be afraid to walk in your purpose, right? Relaunch. You guys know I want to do this for this amount of time. Like, if this is your purpose, we want you to be able to walk in your purpose and know that this is what you need to do, right? And he said the balance of the village. Great. We have somebody like Eb. We have somebody, y'all have somebody on your side. That starts that Brady Bunch boxes that she was talking about. And everybody is able to walk in their purpose and be able to provide something. I may be the funny guy, but I may have a story that can work, that can help, that can ignite something. I literally, when I put the phone down, had to just tell the lady where I'm at right now, the story that I just told y'all. She was like, what am I going to do with my son? He's starting 9th grade, 5'8", this and this and this. I told her the exact same story. And guess what she said? Oh, I don't want to have that conversation. I said, okay, but are you going to have that conversation if something is to happen? And she looked at me and was like, all right, I'm going to call you later. Okay, it is what it is. So don't be afraid to give that to the people, whether they accept it or not. Let's not be afraid to walk in our purpose and continue to grow. Thank you so much, Eb. Anytime, I'll definitely be here for you. Good to see everybody that was on here.
Yes, thank you, guys. All right. Well, again, thank you, guys. I hope that all of you get some much needed rest. And we will definitely be in soon. And if you haven't seen already, I am relaunching on September the 16th it's from 6 to 8. It's on a Friday. I know that a lot of you on this call may not be able to be there in person, but I know that you will be with me spiritually. And so I just really appreciate it. And, even if you know others that could benefit from being a part of the conversation, like just send them to the link, and have them register to come out and to be an active participant in a live discussion. But again, thank you all so much and have a great evening.
Thanks, Ed.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.